This is the Apple Vision Pro, and as a web designer, I think it's something that looks beautiful from the hardware to how the software operates inside. I just have one issue. Let me explain. The first day of using VR, and I'm blown away by the technology. But after a week though, I found myself in a corner, trying to figure out exactly what this is good for. There are three things that I want to cover in this video. First is about VR. What does Apple Vision Pro actually bring to the table? Second is web design. Can I actually see myself designing websites inside of virtual reality? Third is no code. Since there's a lot of drag and drop tools out there now, what's it like building websites using no code? So let's start with number one, VR. Unless you're a virtual reality enthusiast, you might not know that the Apple Vision Pro has been around for the last year. Unfortunately, it's only been accessible to those people in the United States. However, this year in July, Apple added China, Hong Kong, Japan, Australia, Canada, France, and pretty much most other countries to the list for distribution. And as a tech enthusiast, I couldn't help but get my hands on one. And since I'm a bit of a web developer and designer, I thought I'd test out exactly what it's like doing some of these things inside of VR. In terms of the hardware, Apple have definitely done a fantastic job at making this one of the most futuristic and amazing pieces of technology I've ever laid my hands on. However, I would expect nothing less, especially with a price point of nearly $6,000 for an Australian, which is a significant amount, especially when the next competitor, the Meta Quest, comes in at $600. One thing that I could never forget is this large battery pack, which is connected to the side of the headset with a cable that is proprietary, which means that I can't plug in any old USB-C cable in here. However, I can connect the battery to another battery which will charge by USB. The software that runs all of this, Vision OS, is quite magical in the way that it has eye tracking and hand tracking. This allows me to look at any item on the screen and for it to be highlighted almost like a hover effect when you move a mouse over a button. This means all I have to do is tap with my fingers and I can select an item. If you've used Apple before, there were a lot of native apps, like the settings were familiar, similar to my iPad, Safari was there, the Notes app was there, but I could also download apps directly from the iPad and iPhone. The mixed reality, along with the high resolution of the actual displays, performs so well that after a while you might not even realize you're in VR. The floating windows that appear are very clear. All the text is readable and I can't see any pixelation. Additionally, all these windows have this floating shadow underneath them, adding another layer of realism, which I really appreciated. Just like normal windows, they can be resized, and this doesn't just resize the window, but also the resolution of the window too. And I could also move the actual windows closer to myself, so it felt like they were in front of me like a phone, or further away so they felt like they were up against the wall. Being able to create your own workspace with floating windows however you wish also is pretty impressive. I could have YouTube playing on one screen, with another screen looking up a free CodeCamp course, and a third screen just searching up additional tutorials as I wish. I guess what I was most impressed about was how intuitive this is. It didn't take long before I was reflexively looking at letters on my keyboard and typing away. When I went to open up my laptop, I saw a little connect button above it, and when I selected it, it displayed my entire desktop in a floating window. This was awesome. It was like having a giant monitor instead of just my small laptop screen, and I could see myself using this out and about, and something I'll have to definitely test later on. Alright, let me have a look at number 2. Web design with VR. I was pretty excited to see what it would be like creating website designs inside of Figma inside of VR on the Vision Pro. My first attempt at this was opening up the native Safari application inside of the Vision Pro. While it worked as I expected, using my eyes to track was quite difficult to move different elements across. Yes, I could use my hands to zoom in and out of an interface, but what I would have preferred more is just simply using my mouse and keyboard, which I'm used to. And this is where I stumbled across a really cool feature for mouse and keyboard tracking. After I connect up my Vision Pro to my laptop, I can actually look at any screen and it kind of registers it as a second screen where the mouse and keyboard actually follow along to that interface. And this gives me the benefit of both worlds, both eye tracking as well as mouse and keyboard, which I appreciated as well. I can see how much effort Apple has put into making a seamless ecosystem so that whatever you do on whatever device, it's all connected. However, as fun as it was being able to design websites in virtual reality, it wasn't as practical as I thought it would be. This is because, unlike what you're probably seeing on screen, what you actually see inside of the virtual reality is a little bit different. Within the center of what you're staring at, things are usually in focus, but everything around it in a circular fashion goes out of focus, almost like a blur. This means that if I do have floating windows on either side, I can't actually really tell what's in them unless I'm actually turning my head to stare at them directly. And simply having a widescreen monitor in real life would do a much better job. Now let's move on to number 3, using VR for no code. Recently, I've been building quite a lot of websites using Wix Studio. Since it's more drag and drop, I wanted to see how the virtual reality would work in terms of utilizing it alongside no code. One thing I noticed immediately is that a lot of the times I was connecting my laptop to the Vision Pro. I just found this as a better experience of utilizing it, making it feel like I had my own computer inside of the virtual reality rather than inside of just a laptop. The result of this was that it just felt like I was working with a larger monitor rather than I was doing anything unique inside of virtual reality. I took this one step further. While I couldn't natively connect to my Windows PC, I did download and purchase an application called Duet, and this let me replicate my ultra-wide monitor that I normally have on my desk onto my Vision Pro. I found this quite amusing, especially with the fact that it was almost like having the same monitor in front of me, but this time in a mixed reality design. I could then move this monitor anywhere I wanted, up against the wall or close in front of my desk like I would normally have it, or even in front of the kitchen while I was washing the dishes, so I could do other things too. Now that I had this larger widescreen, I thought I would see what advantages VR could actually bring to designing websites. The idea I had was to open up Figma with my reference artwork for my web design on the right hand side, and then trying to replicate and build that in no code in the window in the middle. While I thought this would be the most practical way to utilize VR, I still found it more useful having the Figma file and Wix Studio running back to back on a single window rather than in floating windows. This was mainly because I didn't want to turn my head back and forth, since I often also have to do some coding to add in some cool animation or CSS to a lot of my websites. I also tried to open up VS Code as well on the side. I found that this was not as useful as I thought it would be, simply because I often had to zoom in a little bit more than I'm used to in order to read the text properly, but at the same time I couldn't see as much of my code. Additionally, after doing this for a few hours, I did feel a little bit of a headache, so the longest amount of time I could ever spend in VR was about 1 hour. In conclusion, I don't think I'll be keeping my Apple Vision Pro. It is a wonderful piece of technology. I found it amusing, and especially as something I want to show off as a tech demo, I think it's brilliant. But when it comes to the day-to-day, actually building websites, designing them, and actually staring at a screen for 8 hours straight, I don't think I could handle doing that inside of VR. I'm sure other people might say that they would like to use it for things like watching movies, maybe even playing some VR games, but for me, personally, the value proposition of a $6,000 device sitting on my shelf only being used occasionally just isn't worth it.